Welcome to Encounter, where we celebrate putting faith into action and community leaders who live out compassion, grace, and love. We're a program of the Broome County Council of Churches that addresses food insecurity through CHOW and the Greater Good Grocery, provides hospital and jail ministry, builds wheelchair ramps, and assists neighbors with transportation and shopping services through Faith in Action volunteers. We invite you to the conversation. Encounter your neighbors as we learn to walk together in love and kindness. Good morning. I'm Jeff Kellam, welcoming you to this week's edition of Encounter. I'm serving as the Parish Associate still at the Union Presbyterian Church in Endicott at the corner of Liberty Avenue and Main Street. Our guest today hit the stained glass ceiling really hard, so hard it nearly knocked the call right out of her. But it didn't knock the faith out of her. She left the church, well, the institution, and has built a wonderfully creative ministry in Paris. Not Paris, New York, not Paris, Texas, Paris, France. She's the author of a book called Ruffled by Grace, and our guest today is Michelle Wahila. Welcome.
Thank
the Reverend Ms., I guess. We have something in common. We are both children of the Union Presbyterian Church. We both grew up there. We both were nurtured there. And I don't know about you, but I kind of got my call there.
Yes. Yes.
Decades apart, I hasten to add. Decades apart. Welcome.
Thank you.
I want to talk about the book, of course, but first, tell me about your ministry in Paris.
Well, it's Paris to start with. It is kind of a creative ministry, one that I didn't necessarily want, but I had a colleague, a minister friend from Pittsburgh, call me up and say, I need you to marry someone for me. And at the time I wasn't working, and I said, no, I'm staying home with my kids, and I'm not doing anything in ministry right now. And she said, but I have a couple that needs you. Short story is that I married them, and that wedding led to many more weddings, and now I have the amazing pastoral privilege of marrying couples that are coming to Paris to capture their own little moment of beauty and joy and on their wedding day.
And you know, many people realize that we're not Mary and Sam's. A cultural reference that is probably flying away as little Abner fans have disappeared from the earth. But Mary and Sam would just, that was kind of what he was known for, is marrying people. We put a little bit more thought into it than showing up and reading out of a book and pronouncing. What's that process like for your ministry?
Yeah, it is very unique because I do not have the privilege of being their pastor every day, but for those who are looking for a pastor and for or just a spiritual experience in Paris, I go through a pretty involved questionnaire. I always warn them that there's homework to try to get to know them. But I want to know who they are as people. I want to know their love story, how they met, what they think about love and marriage, and I draw all of that together along with the language that they use to talk about those things to create something that's really unique for every single couple. It's different. It's not from the book. Super fun for me as well.
Yeah, and very personal for them.
Yeah.
So it's not just rote words that are spouted from a book. When I was in my radio and TV work, I was kind of the chaplain to a lot of the radio and TV stations where I was having my programs aired. And a lot of people would say, are you a real minister? Can you do weddings? And I would always say, yes, I can do weddings, but I also have a questionnaire. We do premarital counseling, and I don't know how much it was worth it to do that. I only had one couple quit in the midst of premarital counseling. But I always felt like I don't want to just show up. Don't use me for this. I don't want to be a prop for your lovely wedding. So I understand the pastoral nature of conducting weddings, but this is the focus of your ministry, which I think is what makes it creative and unique. So I mentioned at the beginning of the program that you hit the stained glass ceiling. I think that's a term that you've used. tell me what happened.
I think a lot of things happened to get me to that point, but it was a leap of faith for my family, my young family at the time, a toddler and an infant, and my husband, myself. We took the leap to move across the ocean for an opportunity that we felt was amazing and a great call for me. And like many calls can be, they don't always line up with maybe who you are, who you think the institution is, and my expectations were not met, I think, is an easy way of saying it. And I kind of fell into a really big pit of darkness because the joy that I thought and the joy that I have for ministry and for serving, it just was not there. And it wasn't there for a lot of reasons, but I couldn't do it.
So this was not the folks in the church you were serving. This was the hierarchy of the church, your boss?
I talk a lot about the system because in the end, I don't think anyone was to blame for my experience, and I really want to make that abundantly clear. I kind of coin another term, executive Jesus. I talk about in my book this persona of the institution almost, and how at some point we all started to serve this idea, but it wasn't a healthy one. And so when you get caught up in a system in that way, and you're trying to survive it, because it's not a healthy system, it's not looking for the joy and the love and the things that you're normally in the church for, right. That you all start to lose, and I was losing big, myself included.
Yeah, you think of a call to serve as something heartfelt. Then you realize that call is enmeshed in an institution.
Right.
An institution that through the centuries has had layer upon layer upon layer to the point where it's smothering.
Right, and you can have such a variety of health in an organization, in an institution. That's true of any institution or organization. It's not just the church, right. But I think there is an expectation that in the church we're going to strive for health, because that is where we find our deepest joy, our greatest love, and our greatest measure for service. But when we fail to do those things and tend toward a toxic system, those things get lost, and that's where we start to lose ourselves.
Yeah. And so that's the loss. How do you find?
It took me a long time to find again, to be quite honest. I left pretty broken, and pretty done with the church, to be fair.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful, you were done with the church.
Yeah.
Yes. And you said it took a long time. Are we talking months, 2 years? What long time?
Yeah, I think for about a year I did nothing with the church, and I think that was really a time where I needed to revisit who I was. When I left the church, I was also losing my pastoral identity, which was an identity that I had longer than being a mother or being a wife. So it was a really difficult loss for me. And I needed time to sit with that grief that I was experiencing. So nothing for about a year. And it was maybe a year later when I got that call from my friend to marry that couple. And I do remember standing under a beautiful bridge in Paris and just thinking to myself, this is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. This is who I am. Yeah. And that was, in a way, reclaiming the identity that I had lost.
Right. I remember probably a quarter century ago, an older pastor, now, I'm 25 years younger at this point and serving a small church. And I remember a pastor he was retired at the time, and he talked about women in ministry. And said, well, yeah, we have a lot of more women going to seminary now, but He said, if you look around, you don't see them in big steeple churches. There's no room for them in big steeple churches. Well, 25 years later, there are far more women in seminary than there are men. And some of our most, I almost said prestigious, forgive me, but some of our big steeple churches are pastored by women. Your experience, is it fair to say it did not begin in this country, but the darkness began in France, in that system, or?
I mean, I was within sort of an American bubble because it was an Anglophone community. I was serving an Anglophone church in France. And I have had really good experiences of the church. Previously, I had an amazing mentor. I served a church in Pittsburgh for over a decade before I went to France. So I knew what I was getting into in terms of the bureaucracy, the system, sort of the downsides of institutional church. I was well aware of those things, and that wasn't frightening to me in terms of going to like a big steeple church, but I think also being in France where there was no support system, I was an immigrant, I was learning a new way of life, a new language. My kids were also trying to adjust to that. My husband, I think there were a lot of factors, including the system that made it very difficult for us. Yeah.
So one chapter in the book where it was your day off, a Friday. It's the one that's the preview on Amazon. When you go look for your book, it's the preview that comes up. But it talked about your boss, which would be your supervising pastor, I guess, coming to visit on your day off, and you talked about the tiny little apartment, the church-owned apartment?
Yeah, we lived inside the church building.
Oh my. Well, there's poison right there. And then, you talk that sobbing in the shower, which is a cleansing experience, not only for the body, but for the soul or the spirit as well. Well, that leads me into, and why did you feel the need to write this experience up? That surely it's a desire to share this.
Yeah, I mean, I think the greatest desire for me was to also help other people, because I moved away from the church so long ago now. It was 10 years ago that I left this post. But as I moved away and little by little began to share my story, what I was hearing was that my situation, my experience was not unique. And that was the catalyst, because unfortunately, I just began to see how many people had been affected by similarly toxic systems, and they all felt just as alone as I did.
Yeah.
And if we can't talk about it, how can we expect that we're going to do any better for anyone else? And that was the real catalyst for me.
And I would make the leap that it's not just about the church, it's about any institution where someone is feeling smothered by the layers, or is struggling with, am I in the right place? This didn't turn out the way I thought it was going to be. So the book is not just by an autobiographical account of this darkness that you went through during this period, but there are prayers, there are liturgies. You have taken all the fabric of ministry and woven it into a wonderful book called Ruffled by Grace. Our guest today, by the way, is the Reverend Michelle Wahila. The book is called Ruffled by Grace, and it's published by the how do you say that?
Tehom Publishing
Tehom, Tehom Center, and so you can find it order it through your local bookstore or other online things too. Ruffled by grace. I mean, you could have said shattered by grace. You could have said broken by grace. You chose the word ruffled. How much time did it take to come up with that?
Oh, well, I joked with a friend that I was continuously feeling disheveled by God, by the Holy Spirit, as I was healing. And that it was sort of this play on words a bit too, because as I started to do more weddings and was surrounded by ruffles, quite literally, I thought, no, that's it. It's a bit softer than being disheveled. And isn't that so often how the divine comes to us, in these really soft and quiet prods, if you will. So.
For our radio listeners, you are wearing ruffles on your sleeves. Was that intentional?
Continuously ruffled.
Okay. So as you moved into this new ministry, there was a sense of renewal for you spiritually. But also, I'm interested, as Presbyterians, we are still rooted in the presbyteries that ordained us, or that moved us from one place to another. So you did you leave the Presbyterian tradition in France to become more just totally ecumenical and independent, or are you still you to keep your credentials?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do love being Presbyterian. I love our historic roots, and I love the accountability that comes with committees, as much as they don't always work. And so I had been a member of Pittsburgh Presbytery for a long time, and when I went to work in France, I was considered laboring outside the bounds of my presbytery. It's Presbyterianese for working far away from home. Right. But as I transitioned into my new role, I wanted a bit more connection, because Presbyterians love their connectionalism. And so I asked to go home to New York, and it was a group of Presbyterian ministers, women, who helped me basically get back to my home presbytery, Susquehanna Valley, the presbytery that you are also a member of, to be my oversight, my accountability partner, and my home again. So still Presbyterian and still very much connected.
Yeah. Now the connections will be. I just realized I should have asked Chris when this was going to be on the air. But you'll be doing in two different places on the first weekend of August, right?
The 10th is the first one, and that's at Union Presbyterian Church. Where else should it be but our home church? And then the second event will be the 15th, Friday, the 15th of August, at Curious Grounds Coffee Shop, which is such an amazing piece of the community. I couldn't think of a better place to host an event than at a coffee shop. Right.
So it must be very exciting. I've never actually written a book. I've written a book that is it's a blog. But so when you put this down, you tell your story, and it's going to be there for as long as the book lasts. But your hope is that folks will read the book and hear your story, but we talked about connections. They will also connect their story to yours. So I would imagine if someone has really gotten just shut out by the church, and there are lots of folks these days who are saying, I'm not a member of a church. I don't go to church. I'm still a person of faith. I still believe something, but the church hasn't nurtured me. They may not find their place the way you did. So tell me some advice. What would you say to those folks who have not yet found their way back to faith?
I think, well, first of all, that's many of the couples I serve and end up marrying, that is their situation. And it's interesting to me that folks will still want something spiritual for their wedding. And that point of connection is so important. And the words I try to speak into that are really simple, that you are loved exactly as you are, and if you're not ready to go back through the church doors, it's okay. And that there's no judgment in that, and that God isn't judging you for that, and that the divine will meet you where you are in your life. And that's really part of the reason that I included these kind of quirky blessings, prayers, and liturgies in the book, because they're so everyday, and I really feel that that's where the divine is.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And that if the faith isn't an everyday thing,
Yeah.
then it isn't. I know that the stereotype is someone goes to church and they spend their hour there and they pat themselves in the back, and the rest of the week is just, something else. But there's an interesting thing here that I hope, from Ruffled by Grace, Story of Love in Many Forms, from queer weddings, which means that you are open
Yes.
to and accepting of
Mm-hmm.
LGBTQ couples, to boudoir workshops. I want to know what a boudoir workshop is.
So one of the places that I think a lot of folks who are sort of recovering from church have found connection is in healing from purity culture, and some of the rules and regulations of the church that were oppressive to them, maybe in their youth or in marriage, even in preparation for marriage. And so one of the things that I've really tried to help folks reclaim is a sense of, well, first of all, self-worth, self-love, and acceptance then and therefore of the body. And in France, the idea of beautiful settings and flowers and even maybe some lingerie or beautiful things to wear it's a very common concept. Mm-hmm. So I've begun these workshops mostly for women in a connectional setting of community, small group community, where we can talk about those issues a bit and think about body positivity in a really spiritual way, and then have a little photo shoot for folks individually to try to capture that memory and that piece of spirituality.
Yeah, and I remember doing. I was asked to do a wedding, and when they told me the date, it didn't register that it was Halloween, and so I had almost agreed to do it. And they said, "Oh, by the way, we're going to be in costume." And I said, "What kind of costumes did you have in mind?" Still, it hadn't registered Halloween. And she said, "Well, I'm going to be a medieval bride." I said, "Well, that's nice." And I said, "And your husband will be a medieval groom?" She said, "Well, that's what he was aiming for, but I think he's going to dress as a gladiator." Okay. And now warning signs are starting to go off. And I said, "The ones who slayed the Christians in the Colosseum." And she said, and you're welcome to come too in a costume. And it occurred to me that many of our formal weddings, we're all in costume. Yeah. I'm wearing a costume when I put on my vestments. Mm-hmm. The bride isn't going to dress like this ever again, perhaps. Mm-hmm. The groom has rented the costume. So yeah, we are all costume people, and then we take these pictures and we look at them later and think, when our little kids grow up and start looking at these pictures and think, "Mom and Dad, I've never seen you like that before," I can understand the images of body, the images of what we clothe our bodies with. This is a part of our makeup, not only for the special occasion of the wedding, but the way we dress for work, the way we dress for play, the way we dress for the beach or for a mountain hike. So that's interesting. A boudoir. Yep. Okay, our guest once again is Michelle Wahila, Ruffled by Grace. As you look to the weddings and the group settings too, you mentioned working with groups. What are the things that couples are most concerned about when they must open up to you and share some of their second thoughts about what they're about to do?
I'm not sure it's second thoughts. I mean, I think by the time people come to us as pastors, they're pretty certain they're going to be married. And so part of my philosophy has always been, if you are coming to me for a blessing, I'm going to do everything in my power to make it happen for you. And that is advice that I got from my mentor in Pittsburgh, the first pastor who was my boss and is such a good friend to me. But when they open up, it's often more about family dynamics or what's going on in their lives and the people that are going to be there to surround them on their wedding day. And I always tell them my job is twofold. One, to make everyone there feel welcome and a part of the moment that is happening.
Right.
And secondly, to slow down time for you, the couple, so that you can enjoy this and try to capture the memory in your heart, because it goes by so fast. And if I can do either of those two things, or both of those both of those things for people, I feel I've done my job for them.
Yeah. And the photos that you've shared are most of them are outside. They're not in a church. Frankly, I used to get a little bit upset with folks who wanted to use my church because it was pretty. They didn't care who I was or what the church was or what it believed, but it was pretty, you know. But I've also done lots of weddings at a riverbank or under an oak tree in somebody's backyard. So you're not doing church weddings. You're doing church. You're finding sacred space for these vows to be spoken. Do people write their own vows? Do you help them write their vows?
I do. I have my own worksheet to help you through that, and we have all sorts of places where we will do that. To perform the ceremony, I last weekend had to hike up a very large hill to get to the big oak tree where the couple wanted to be married, and we do create the sacred space, as you said, for everyone. And the vows will make it. They are part of what's so sacred about the moment, but we also try to mark the space and say we're here for something very special. Right.
I have a friend in Pennsylvania who is doing a similar ministry, and on her property she's built a gazebo, and couples will come and be married there. That's her outreach to the community. So again, many thanks for writing the book, but also for being a guest on Encounter. And gosh, Paris. I know every city has its delights, but there is something that is imprinted in us about the romance of the Eiffel Tower and so on. I spent a couple of hours with you in Paris with your family, and it was all too short, and we glimpsed the tower, as we ran from place to place. Our guest has been Michelle Wahila, who's the author of Ruffled by Grace, and our thanks again to you for coming. And our thanks to you for viewing and listening to the Encounter program produced by the Broome County Council of Churches. And a reminder that Bill Carter and I do a Spirit of Jazz podcast, which is available wherever you've lost your podcasts. You can find that to find out about the connections between spirituality and jazz. I'm working on a program now with Bill that we might find a place for on Encounter. We'll see about that. I'm Jeff Kellam, Parish Associate at the Union Presbyterian Church in Endicott, hoping that in the coming week you'll be gentle with people and with yourself.